In this demonstration, I'm going to walk through how I use Jenkins, the Foreman, and Amazon's Web Services to construct a continuous integration pipeline for configuration management. All of the pipeline activities that we're going to be looking at in this demonstration are run from Jenkins, so a good place to start is to look at the Jenkins job that I have configured. This Jenkins job is tied to a project on GitHub, which has one Puppet module, a set of integration tests, and a little bit of scaffolding. I've configured Jenkins here to pull GitHub, so when I push a change to the repository, the job will automatically run. Let's walk through the different build steps. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll move into the module directory for this particular module. We'll change the build number. So what I'm doing is I'm embedding the Jenkins build number into the version number and the metadata for the package. And then I'm going to clean the directory to make sure there's no build artifacts from previous builds. The validate step is going to run basic unit tests and linting, and then the build itself creates the packaged Puppet module by running Puppet module build. Foreman has a built-in Puppet master, and I'm using the environments capability inside of a Puppet master to make sure that when I push this test module, it only affects hosts that are in that environment. So here you can see this is my build artifact, the package. I've got a wildcard here to select whichever version we happen to build this time. And then here I'm going to push it into the development environment. And once I've pushed it into the development environment, then I'm going to begin the integration tests. So the first thing I'm going to do is use the Foreman command line interface to provision a host, and I'm going to name it after the build tag for this particular job. Then I'm going to ask the Foreman repeatedly using the hammer command if that host has checked in and applied the Puppet module, and if so, if there were any failures during the apply. At this point, if I've made a syntax error or if there's an include that I haven't included or something like that, the build will fail and kick back. If it doesn't, if the build succeeds, the Puppet module is successfully applied, then I'm going to go through and run a set of shell scripts. The shell scripts are test cases that I can use for each of the items that I've put into the Puppet module to verify externally that the module did the thing that we wanted it to do functionally. I'm going to walk you through real quick the host groups functionality in Foreman. This is what allows me to provision a host into a group and automatically have the Puppet class defined. So here you see I have a standard operating environment host group, and then nested under that I have a development host group. That host group, when machines are provisioned into it, automatically include the SOE Puppet module. That's the Puppet module that we're working on here inside of the thing. So let's go ahead and start with a test. Let's fail the build with a test that will not work, that we expect it to work, and then let's correct and fix the build by actually implementing the Puppet code. So the first thing I'll do is I'll go into here and I'll write a test. And I'm just going to copy one that I already have to see if the wget package is installed, to see if the NTP package is installed. So a little bit of rewriting here. I'm just going to see, is NTP installed? And if it is, I'll succeed, otherwise I'll fail. Other scripts, examples here I have would check, for example, this one checks to see if the Puppet service is running. And then I also have one here that you could use that actually just checks the contents of a file. So at this point we should have a new file. Let's add it and let's commit it. So we've added it, we've committed it, let's push to GitHub. Now if we come back here to Jenkins in the dashboard, we wait for a minute here, we should see that Jenkins will see that the commit has been made to GitHub, and it will kick off the build. Give this just a minute here. Great, so Jenkins now sees that a commit has been made to GitHub, And now at this point it's going to start the build. Here it is. We can watch the console output. So you can see relatively quickly I did validation to make sure that syntax was correct. I also checked the JSON syntax in the metadata file after editing the version number. I've built my package. So this particular package here is 0.1.0-17. 17 is my build number. And I've installed that module here into the development environment inside the Puppet Master. At this point, we're going to provision a host using the Foreman API. We should actually already see that here. So now you can see this is the build tag, SOE, this is build 17. And that host should be launched now in EC2. There it is. So I've configured EC2 as a compute resource inside of Foreman that allows me to use the Foreman command line interface to launch a host into EC2 and use the Cloud Init capability in EC2 to directly put it into the host group when it launches. Now we can see that that host is running. It'll take probably a minute or two for it to go ahead and run the Puppet module. So at this point, I'm just iterating in a loop in a shell script to ask Foreman if there have been any reports for this host. And once it sees a report, then it's going to check to see if there were any failures or successes. We'll take a look at that in the UI when it comes up. Assuming that they're all successes, then it's going to run that set of shell scripts. At that point, we should expect this build to fail. That last shell script that we wrote, the NTP package should not be installed, and we should have an error message here. So we're still waiting. Take a minute here. You can see here in the Foreman UI there's no report for this host, although it was created successfully. Alright, so we see that it was applied, and there were here's the output from that script. The status is active, so when the host came up, the Puppet changed a few things. It changed, in fact, 3 things on the host. Nothing failed. So that is good. Now you'll notice here we're running through the shell scripts. So the first thing we're doing is checking the message of the day. We are making sure the Puppet agent is running. Then we are checking to see wget is installed, and then the last thing we're checking here is NTP installed. We get a failure. This will mark the build as a fail, which is exactly what we wanted. So now I'm going to implement in Puppet a fix, in a sense, for the error. So I'll come back into here. I will edit the manifest init.pp, and I'm just going to basically copy this into here. I want to make sure that the NTP package is installed. That's it. I'm going to check, make sure that this looks good. So there's the diff from Git. I'm going to add it to the commit. And I'll push. Great. At this point, we'll see once again, Jenkins should pick up the change and it should run a build. I think we're already seeing here that it's done that. And if we look at the console output, there we go. So this is build 18. Right now it's in the step of provisioning the host. So if I come back here to Foreman, I should see that I have a new host here once it provisions. And in EC2 we'll also see the same thing. Let's wait for this task to finish. Okay, it's provisioned. Refresh. Now I can see the host, no report. And if I look in EC2, I can now see that I have a build 18. While it's doing that, let's take a look at this report that we had from 17. You'll see here, this is a list of all the output here. But the main thing here is that the metrics at the end, right? So first of all, you can see that I got the 3 applied, 0 restarted, 0 failed, failed restarts. That's what we were looking at before, but here you see it in a graphical representation. And also you get a nice report on the metrics from Foreman. It tells you that 75% of the time that this Puppet run was doing, it was trying to install packages. 22% of the time was retrieving the configuration and setting it up. Great, so let's go back to the hosts. Still waiting on a report there. And once the host is provisioned and it is run, then once again the shell scripts in the test directory will be run, and we should see a successful build this time. Alright, status is active. This time you'll see that 4 were applied instead of 3, so that tells me that 4 changes were made. And then lastly here, let's take a look. Here is the shell script. So it SSHs into the box, it runs RPM -Q NTP, and exits with success. So at this point we have a high degree of confidence, not only that the change we made affected the change that we were looking for in the estate, but we also have a good feeling that it did not break anything else, right? It did not introduce a regression because we ran all of our unit tests from the previous things as well on that host. We also know that a host cleanly provisioned can have this applied with success. Another thing that I might do is I might go back and check the next report of 17 to make sure that when 17 went from its current version to the new version, we didn't break anything there, right? That'll come around in 25 minutes. One thing you might do is increase the interval in which hosts check in so that you can get those reports faster.